Hey y'all, it's Weedy Weekend 72, and yeah, don't panic, because it's organic. My friends, it is Turkey Day here in Canada. It's Thanksgiving. I don't care about the history of Thanksgiving. I only care that we spend a day giving thanks. Period. Giving thanks for those who care about us and those that we care about. I reached out today to all my friends and all my family. They have all reached back. Remember, family's the most important. Don't insult. Hug. Peace and cheers, and let's get started on Weedy Weekend 72. My disclaimer, because I have to put it, my son's with me this weekend, but he is outside making a snowman. Well, I do this so he doesn't hear a thing about it. Dogs, stop it. And that's why. Him and my 30-year-old boy are making a snowman. So let's move on to Weedy Weekend, and the first story, it's a weedless one because I'm not putting any smoke in this house. But our first story is paranoia and anxiety. What are the side effects of THC cannabis? Leafly is going, they say, to do another one on what are the side effects of CBD and what are the side effects of CBG. And I hope they do about it all, but there's 100 and some odd different chemicals in the plant. So one must remember that they're talking about the side effects of THC, and I don't think they're exactly right. But let me read this. One of the worst side effects of THC is anxiety and paranoia. Though small amounts of THC are likely to induce mild paranoia or social anxiety, edibles in large doses can cause exaggerated side effects. Just ask the guy who ate an edible and called 911 because he thought he was dying. THC is known to relieve anxiety in small doses and increase it in larger. This is due to a biphasic effect, meaning it can have two opposite effects in high dose versus low dose. Some people are genetically predisposed to experience anxiety with cannabis as a result of our own brain chemistry. It's how we work with the medicine. But one must remember THC in and of itself does very little except for pain and creating an environment in which cancerous cells can't live or be created. It is the entourage effect that creates a lot of these side effects, and that is what I think is missing on this. They go on to talk about how you can. The first part of the story talks about what you can do to mitigate the issues, and the rest of the story talks about the issues: dry mouth, dry eyes, anxiety, etc. I myself say experiment, 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 because purple ice for me is probably one of the most calming medicines ever. It doesn't matter if I take a little bit and I get calm, or I take a whole bunch and I get really calm. It doesn't have the biphasic effect because it affects me and my brain chemistry correctly. Purple ice doesn't do that for some people. It's finding what works for you and sticking to a good grower and a good supplier like MMJ Total Healthcare, so you know that you're getting the same product every time. And even then, understanding that without either switching up to a different strain or a tolerance break of 3 to 4 days, it's going to lose its effect on you. Still a very good story, and I would say read it. Find what works for you in that story. And now we would normally have a toke. Cheers to that. So cheers, everybody. And let's move on to our next story. Wish I could show you the boys out there. I want to get through this so that I can put on my jacket and go out there. And I probably won't roll in the snow with them, but I'll still have fun. The next story comes out of Oregon. ATTN.com. Marijuana smoking increases, yet marijuana arrests decrease. And this is really, really good. I'm going to read this. The latest marijuana arrest data released this week by the FBI, shows that 643,122 Americans were arrested on marijuana charges in 2015, last year, with 89% of those arrests for simple possession, not for cultivation or trafficking. While that number remains far too high, that's a lot of individuals having their lives and careers absolutely destroyed over a plant. It is the lowest number of marijuana arrests reported since 1996, and it represents nearly a 25% reduction in arrests since the peak was reached in 2007. This is good. This is good. A decrease in arrests? There should be no arrests. We need to move to a more, like Portugal, a health-based system, not a criminal-based system. Most people can use marijuana, alcohol, anything recreationally without it causing any concern in their life. But we, as North American countries, have, and across the world, except Portugal, have said that if you're taking it, you're going to get arrested, period. Why not leave everyone alone except if there's exhibiting problems, and then get the health services involved? Sorry about the barking. The boys are playing. Stop it! The dogs will bark. I have 3 dogs right now, babysitting 2. Enforcing marijuana laws cost us about $3.6 billion a year, yet the war on marijuana has failed to diminish the use or availability of marijuana. It's a waste of money. So, another good story will be down below. Love it that the arrests are down, but they should be gone. It's a ridiculous state of affairs. Our next story. This is a great story. I request all of you to take the time and read it. Read it carefully, because even at a time when most of the old myths are being destroyed about marijuana, there's so many new ones coming out by the alcohol industry, by the pharmaceutical industry, to try and continue to scare us away from this wonderful medicine. And one of the favorite tools lately has been a study that pointed at dopamine being responsible for the high that we experience in THC, stating that basically marijuana tickles the reward system of our brain, flooding it with dopamine. And so many people just accepted that as oh, that makes sense. And then dopamine, oh, it isn't all that good for you, high doses and all that. It creates so many things. But let me read this. THC, acting through cannabinoid receptors, also activates the brain's reward system, which includes regions that govern response to healthy, pleasurable behaviors like sex and eating. Like most other drugs of abuse, THC stimulates neurons, in the reward system to release the signaling of chemical dopamine at levels higher than typically observed in response to natural stimuli. This flood of dopamine contributes to the pleasurable high that recreational marijuana users seek. Wrong. You go on to the next and it says that it gets debunked. Dopamine is not responsible. It is a drug called anandamide. Anandamide is something that helps us be calmer, be cooler, be more collected. They're calling it the bliss molecule. It comes from the Sanskrit word ananda, which means joy or bliss. So, it turns out anandamide is responsible for much more than happiness. Anandamide also plays important roles in memory, motivation, movement, pain, appetite, fertility, even potentially inhibiting cancer cell proliferation. But it's because of its role in neurogenesis, the formation of new nerve cells, that anandamide is also an anti-anxiety and antidepressant agent. Unfortunately, like other neurotransmitters, anandamide quickly breaks down the body, so it doesn't create a perpetual state of bliss, meaning we have to medicate. It's a great story. It's something that I really suggest y'all read. It comes from Leafly. It is very in-depth and full of knowledge. I really enjoy this story, and I enjoy breaking myths. We know that. You know that. I know that. Peace and cheers. The next story. Oh, let's have a cheers to that. The next story, theweedblog.com. Cannabis is not a gateway drug. This as per the U.S. Attorney General Lynch. She was speaking recently at in Richmond, Kentucky, and she admitted that cannabis is not a gateway drug, which is one of the most prominent arguments made in opposition to legalizing it. And I'm going to quote her. Lynch followed, she said, there's a lot of discussion about marijuana these days. Some states are making it legal. People are looking into medical uses for it. And I understand that it is still as common as almost anything. When we talk about heroin addiction, we unusually, as we have mentioned, are talking about individuals that started out with a prescription drug problem. And then because they need more and more, they turn to heroin. It isn't so much that marijuana is a step right before using prescription drugs or opioids. She followed the statement by being a bit more specific. It's not as though we are seeing that marijuana is a specific gateway. They are not seeing it's a gateway. And I will add to that, many other studies I've shared in previous Weedy Weekends point to the fact that it is an exit drug. It is a way to get off the addiction to pharmaceuticals, get off the addiction to painkillers. Very smart. So I like that. When somebody like the Attorney General of the United States is starting to make specific statements like that, maybe we can finally get the DEA to reschedule. And this leads to this story. Good segue. Canada. What do? We are about to legalize nationwide the recreational use of this product. Because of it, we will be in contravention of two international drug treaties. 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs and the 1988 Convention against illicit traffic in narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances. This article goes on to say there are two ways we can do it. We can just be in default and say, we're taking a stand, we're in default of these treaties, let the water boil over. Let it happen. Turn up the heat. Let it happen. The other way is we can remove ourselves from the treaties and then negotiate a sign back in, thus forcing those treaties into looking at themselves. The writer of this would rather see us cease, pull away from the treaties, and then try to re-enter the treaties with exceptions for Canada. I disagree. I think our best bet is to just say they are no longer valid. Those treaties are based, we should even have a second stream, a piece of the government that's going to work with the United Nations on changing these, because we should say, A, they were created a long time ago under the stigma of old knowledge. New scientific knowledge is overwhelming that the knowledge that these treaties were created under was incorrect and needs to be relooked at. Number two, we just let it happen, because that forces the United Nations into, do we hold Canada against their own better wishes, or do we look at these old archaic laws and start letting our laws more accurately reflect a public who are interested in the well-being of their public? This is a great, great study. So, the final is something that I really like to see. I hope it happens in Calgary too, is marijuana for what are they called? Marijuana for trauma. They have 11 locations in Canada. They opened their 12th, their first in Western Canada. in Edmonton. Wonderful place to have it because that is the military center of the West, and there are a lot of veterans with PTSD, and this place is serving veterans with PTSD at no cost, and by serving other customers they recoup that cost somewhat through them. It's a wonderful partnership. I love this place. One of the guys here, I'm 10 years into cannabinoid therapy. I know it works. I feel that I am an example that it works, and I consider myself very lucky that I didn't have to go down the pharmaceutical road. I myself, not from combat, have PTSD. I want to make that very clear because I see people joke when they hear, oh, so-and-so has PTSD. Wow, where did they go to war? I'm sure, positive, that PTSD from combat is the worst form of it, bar none. But PTSD from any trauma is horrible, and it can be derived from any major trauma in your life. I have suffered some pretty bad traumas in the past, so I won't get into that. I just want to say, when you're thinking about PTSD, think wider. Think wider. There are a lot of sufferers of that awful, awful program, and boy, oh boy, does THC help get your mind away from the demons that exist, that may never disappear, but you can manage them. So, power to you, marijuana for trauma in Edmonton. Power to you. More of it, please. More of it, please. And that brings me to the end of Weedy Weekend. It's been a wonderful one, a weedless one, and a fairly quiet one. So, peace and cheers, love and harmony. If you see someone without a smile today, maybe sit down and have a talk with them. That might help. Cheers.